Sitting up here looking down at the city, it's amazing because everything is so small. It really puts into perspective how small we are, how small our lives really are. And as amazing as it is, if I'm being honest, it's kind of discouraging. Just think about it. How many people are down there just living life, going to school, spending all day playing video games, doing chores, spending another night inside the house watching Netflix or on their phones, and they're just going through the motions. There has to be something more to life than this, right? Just the everyday routine. It's sad because how many people are down there and they think that their life has no purpose? Like I said, being up here shows how small we really are, but it's incredible because it also shows how big God is. Being up here and seeing all that God created and how purposefully He was when He was creating it tells me that He had to be purposeful when He created me. If He had a plan when He created this thing we call Earth, the universe, and everything that goes into keeping the planets aligned, then why wouldn't He have a plan for me, for you, for everyone down there? Well, that's the thing I want you to understand. God created you with a purpose, and He has a plan for your life. God has a plan for every single one of us. It doesn't matter where you came from, how much money your parents have, or what school you go to. God wants to use you in a big way. And a perfect example of this in the Bible is Esther. God had a plan for Esther's life, and He used her to do incredible things. But when you look at where she came from and the things that she went through, man, it would have been very easy to think that there's no way this girl's going to be anything important. It would have been easy for her to become discouraged and just live life going through the motions, thinking that she had no purpose. Esther's story started out pretty normal. A loving home, a mom and a dad, but then it wasn't so normal. Her parents died when she was young, so she was an orphan. Her life just came crashing down. Think about this. The ones who were supposed to be there for you, for her, and support her as she grew up are gone. Maybe you can relate to that feeling of not having a mom or a dad, or life all of a sudden feeling like it's being taken away from you. Just remember, no matter the situation or how bad things look, God has a plan for your life. He has a purpose for your life. Esther's world has just been turned upside down, and with the passing of her parents, she was taken in by her uncle Mordecai. And the Bible tells us that he took her in and he raised her as one of his own daughters. A while later, the king at the time, King Xerxes, decided he was going to find a new queen after banishing his first one. So he made a decree that the most beautiful women in the land be brought back to him so he can pick which one will be his queen. Yeah. Well, Esther was a very beautiful young woman. So she was one of the 400 women picked to go before the king. Lucky for her, right? She gets to go stand before a king with 399 other women and hope she is picked to live a life with a man that she's never met. Think about this. This king is having 400 women brought to him, and he's going to have a beauty pageant and pick the one he likes the most. Esther, it's not like she had a choice if she wanted to do this or not. She had to go. This girl can't catch a break. So she's taken from her home and forced to live in the palace so that she can be judged if she is pretty enough to be queen or not. I don't see Disney making a movie about this anytime soon. Now, if you don't know the story of Esther, you might be thinking, okay, what's God's plan in all this? How did God use this? Well, this is where we see the start of what God has planned for Esther. See, Esther's destiny started with humility. Now, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And God was going to use Esther's humility. God had a plan for her. Through everything she went through, He was building her character and her humility. And that humility made her stand out in the midst of a crowd. So much so that when she was brought into the king's palace, she was immediately recognized. She found favor out of 399 women, and she was given special treatment with Haggai, the man put in charge of taking care of all these women. Look at Esther 2:16. When it was Esther's turn to go to the king, she accepted the advice of Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the harem. She asked for nothing except what he had suggested, and she was admired by everyone who saw her. So Esther, who's about to go stand before the king, listens to advice of a servant and only puts on what he recommends. Talk about humility. When is the last time you took advice from someone who might be considered lower than you? For you, that might mean someone in a grade lower than you are. Or maybe someone on JV tries to tell you something that might help you, but because you're varsity, you don't listen. Or maybe it's your little brother or sister. They try to give you advice. Are you humble enough to stop and listen? Or do you just disregard them because they're littler than you? Because Esther was humble enough to listen, she found favor with everyone, including the king himself. So much so that he made her queen. The orphan who had just lived with her uncle, just beat out 399 other women. Now she is queen. God used what Esther went through, and although her life seemed to be falling apart, God's plan prevailed. What has God given you? What has God given you that has set you apart from others? Is it your character, your integrity, your faithfulness? Maybe God has given you a skill or an ability. What I love about Esther was she didn't go seeking affirmation or approval from anyone. She was herself. She was humble. And God used what he put inside of her. She wasn't going to go around trying to be someone else or compare with everyone else. She was humble and willing to let God use her. As we get into Esther's story a little more over the next few weeks, we're going to see that this is a trait that stayed with her. She did not think of herself as better than others. She listened to wisdom and took some steps that were hard to take. And because of all of this, God was able to work his plan through her and change history. An orphan to a queen. What could go wrong now, right? Well, this is just the start of Esther's story. And maybe you're listening to me and this is the start of your story. You're wondering if God has forgotten about you or even asking the question why he created you. I wish we could just know what God has planned for us. But like Esther, God wants to use our experiences to build the traits in us that we will need for our destiny. I know it's difficult to see, and I hope in the middle of a hard time, you can turn to him. I know it's difficult because we don't have all the answers about what God is going to do in our life. But I can make you this promise. In a world that is so big and we are so little, God has designed you with a specific purpose and destiny. So I would encourage you to start praying that God would reveal that to you. You don't have to be like so many others who are just going through the motions. God wants to use you to do something incredible. And whatever that plan or that purpose is, it starts with humility, just like Esther. We're going to be getting to her story over the next 3 weeks. So I want you guys to stay with us and come back next week.